Hey, everybody. Welcome to Perpetual Motion, a podcast focused on self-care, communication, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson. Each episode, I interview thought leaders from all over the world who share tips and tools to boost your personal growth. My guest today is Clint Callahan, a therapist, social worker, coach, and author of the new book, Beat Burnout in 15 Minutes a Day. He joins me to discuss breaking the people-pleasing cycle. Is that a problem for you? Because it is for me. Our broken mental health system and the power of incremental transformation. So stay with us. It's going to be an amazing show.
You can't say Dr. Mo ain't tell ya that fear magnifies the consequences of failure. What are you scared of? Why are you afraid?
Welcome, Clint.
Thank you, Dr. Mo. I'll try and live up to your intro.
Please do. Please do. I don't think that'll be any problem based on our previous conversations. You bring it. You bring it. Listen, Clint, millions of Americans, as you know, are struggling with mental health issues. According to Access Health, the three most common mental health issues today are anxiety disorders, major depression, and bipolar disorder. Why are these so prevalent? And is it better diagnosis and access to care, or are there changes in society?
That's a very big question. I would say it's probably a combination of both. It is more access to care, and especially one of the positives of COVID, if there were any positives, is that the access to care actually to mental health grew exponentially thanks to the ability to do telehealth and to do texting health and to do the more phone call based mental health, so that people that before didn't have access to care now are able to get access to care. So that is one of the reasons. But also I think it's more just the change in society as well, because we as a population are more open to discussing that we're human beings and we have our faults, our foibles, our problems, our issues, our joys, our sorrows, and we're more willing to discuss that.
Got it. And that was a great big answer to that big question. Thank you. As a therapist, a professional in this area with decades of experience, how does listening to others' problems and concerns every day for hours impact your own mental health?
That's really good. I mean, for me, early on, I didn't do what some of my professors told me to do, which is the clinical therapeutic distance that therapists need to have is very specific, but at the same time, you can't be so distant that you're not engaged with your client. So one of my favorite tools that I use and that I teach a lot of my clients to use as well is basically what one of my professors said. You know, you have two choices when you're doing therapy with people. You can either be the lightning rod or you can be the one holding on to the lightning rod. And she said, you know, when you're holding on to the lightning rod because you are Kentucky Fried Chicken by the end of the day. So the job of a lightning rod is to take the power, take all the electricity, take all the lightning and ground it out to the ground, recognizing that it's not theirs. So that's what I really, really try and reinforce. And early on in my career, having that very strong boundary of this is their pain, not my pain. Just because you're in pain doesn't mean I have to get into your pain with you. So my job as a therapist and as a life coach is to help you see your pain differently so you can move through it and beyond it, but not get stuck in it with you. That's the way I look at it.
Wow, that's a great analogy. Good advice from your professor. And as I listened to you, I thought that's also good advice for friendship, for relationships, because I'm a very empathetic person and I struggle with that for a long time as a caregiver myself, also trying to take on everybody's burdens and help them with their problems when I'm dealing with my own life. So I think that's something we can all adopt and try to learn from. And it makes a lot of sense to be a conductor and just let it pass through.
And it's one of the things that I teach people is by just doing kind of basically a 5-step mindfulness exercise that you can do. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes. I basically call it an emotional management plan. Because that's when we are overloaded, right? Is when people are throwing their emotions and then our emotions get triggered because they're throwing their emotions around. And then you're both stuck in this emotional mess, which can sometimes turn into a war between the two of you, unbeknownst to both of you. And so one of the things that I teach people is I teach people to do box breathing, which is a scientifically proven breathing method that helps to turn off the parasympathetic nervous system where the fear story and biological fear resides. Because for a lot of people, when they think of fear as only being a mental thing. But fear, actually, 80% of it starts in the body. And then the mind jumps in with its story, which then enhances the entire thing. So what box breathing does, which is you breathe in for 4 and hold your breath. You breathe out for 4 and then hold your breath empty. And then you breathe back in for 4 again. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. And by doing that, it allows you, and then you do that 4 times. And what it does is basically telling your body, which is currently in fight or flight, there is no danger. Because human beings for 300,000 years, 299,990 years, the last 100 years, we've been the most safe we've ever been. But for about the previous, that long, we were in survival mode. And that's where that's where the biological fear piece comes from, is survival mode. And so if you do box breathing and then you write the story as honestly as you can for about 2 minutes onto a page, and then you would do just a quick bit of exercise to get the adrenaline in your system moved to the places where it needs to be instead of in your stomach, heart, lungs, and brain. Because when adrenaline's in your brain, it speeds up your brain, but it gives a weird side effect for human beings, is it slows down time. So when we're in that adrenalized state, anxiety that is literally a minute long feels like 10 minutes because that's how fast our brain is processing things. And then by doing those 3 things and then coming back and reading what you wrote, it then allows you to debunk this story that you told yourself. The most common one that I talk with my clients about is you get an email from your boss. It says, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you this afternoon at 3:00. Let's say it's 11 o'clock, right? So you could spend the next 4 hours telling yourself, I'm going to be fired. I did something wrong. That there was that one project I know I didn't do my best on. And now the chickens are coming home to roost and they're going to get me and I'm going to be fired. And then once I'm fired, of course, that means I'm dead under a bridge within a week because everything means it's over. Because that's where survival goes to. Survival goes to, I'm dead in a week. And then, of course, this story just piles on. And so by doing the box breathing, it allows you to break out of that fear cycle because it tells your body, hey, we don't know what the email's about. And so let's say you do the box breathing, you calm down, you go through, you do your writing, you recognize that the story is false. You go and see your boss and they say, hey, I just want to commend you. You did a great job. You were the highest earner in all the different quarters. I'm going to give you, I'm giving you a bonus. And if you would have went in there full of anxiety and full of fear, who knows what you would have said? You might have walked in and said, you know what? I don't even need to hear this. I quit. And then your boss would be sitting there going, but I was just going to give you this check and a plaque and say, good job. Where is this coming from? And that's what we do, because one of the things I've learned in the 23 years that I've done this, and I've spoken with thousands and thousands of people, is the story, because of survival that is built into all of us, starts at fear. That's where all of our emotions start from, which is hard for people to hear because they don't want to think that most of their emotions start from fear. There's even fear in happiness and joy. And people are like, that doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't that be the exact opposite end of the spectrum? But that's not the case, because there's times, even when you're your most happy, where that thought crosses your mind, right? That says, will I ever be this happy again? Will I ever feel this way again? That's fear creeping in.
Wow, that's great. And we've all been there, especially with new relationships. Is this real? Is this going to last? You start sabotaging yourself. You are so right. There's so much there, right there. That was awesome. That was worth the price of admission, folks. And I assume you're all here for free, but had you paid That would be worth the price of admission. You really get some good tips with that. I didn't know what the box breathing was called, but I knew to do it. I just knew to do it when I got nervous, because I would either hold my breath or start breathing really fast and my heart would start pounding.
Yes, it was.
So yeah, I like that. Thank you. So let's talk about another thing that impacts a lot of us because of things that happen within our environment, within our community, and that's grief. And a lot of us are struggling with grief from something recently to years ago. I see Facebook posts all the time. My friends are still distraught about loss, 5, 10, 15 years ago of parents. But I know that you lost your mother in a very difficult way. Can you share what happened and how you cope with that loss?
Yeah, so it's been, this October will be 20 years that since my mom committed suicide. And she, initially before she committed suicide, she became sick with an illness, with a autoimmune disorder that about 5,000 people on the planet have. So not a lot of people have it. So there was
rare.
There was no funding. There was nothing. It was like, hey, just take these medications and hopefully it'll do something. And so she spent the last, couple of years of her life trying medication and basically being in pain 24/7. And it was called dermatomyositis. And basically what it did is it liquefies your joints from the inside. Your body just eats its joints.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really bad for a long time. And she got to the point where she lost her faith and she lost her ability to just continue to function because of the pain. And she decided that I can't do this anymore, because if this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life, she was older. She was 53 when she died. So she would have had another maybe 40 years of that maybe. And so she decided that she didn't want to. And it broke me most because I was with her about 2 weeks before at a pain program at a hospital. And I was working with her and with the doctors, and I was there learning kind of what we can do to help her learn how to manage her pain without drugs and those kind of things. And during that time, she became psychotic because she drank too much water. And so she had to be put in the psych hospital. And then when she got out...
Did you say from drinking too much water?
Yes. If you drink too much water, it can mess with the electrolyte balance in your body, and that can cause heart problems, and it can actually cause psychosis, short-term psychosis. It's called medically induced psychosis.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't know it either. So it was, because what happened was she was supposed to go do a urine test, and she's been drinking a bunch of water. And so she drank more water because they needed a lot of urine, and it just tipped her right over the edge. And it was something I never experienced either. Luckily, I knew enough how to Google stuff, and from the symptoms, I was able to kind of figure out what it was. And then the doctors confirmed it. So that was good. But going through that, so she went through the pain clinic and those different things. And then near the end of it, she basically told me, this pain clinic is not going to work for me. I'm going to commit suicide. This is exactly how I'm going to do it. And so she told me what she was going to do. And I went and told her doctors and told her psychiatrist and told everybody there that I could tell, because, told them this is my credentials and this is what I do for a living. I've been doing this for 7 years. I'm licensed in California. I've worked in psychiatric hospitals. I've done all the things. So this is not her just saying it because she's having a bad day. This is her being real. And they basically just said, as long as she completes the program, she'll be fine. So that's what broke me, is the system that I'd been working in and pledging my life to didn't work, because she ended up doing that and they didn't do anything for her. They just said, just have her try these meds and see if it works. And it was really difficult. And so that broke me, and that got me out of mental health for about 4 years. And then then I was lost in grief for about 5 years. Lost in grief, lost in pain, lost in just anger and frustration, and, angry at myself. I had lots of guilt and shame and all those things because I knew better. I should have done something, but I did everything I knew how to do at the moment. And of course, hindsight is 20/10, right? It's better than 20/20. Hindsight is 20/10. You can look back and you can always know the million things you could have done differently, the things you would have done differently. but staying stuck in it does nothing but keep you stuck in the past and keep you stuck in your pain. So by that time, we'd had our first child. 2008 happened, and my wife and I lost our home, and so we had to go live with her in-laws, with my in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I was in the biggest, deepest depression, burnout that I've ever been in my entire life. And from that, it really came to a point where I had to stop and ask myself the question, what kind of husband did I want to be? What kind of man did I want to be? What kind of father did I want to be? Because burnout is really, really insidious. First, it pulls you away from from just doing anything with anybody else. That's the first thing it does. Then it begins to pull you away from yourself, from being able to connect with yourself, from wanting to do good personal hygiene, from wanting to do those kind of things. Then it begins to pull you away from your family. And finally, and lastly, when we most of the time intervene is when it happens at work, because then your performance starts to slip and it really starts to become noticeable. And that's when people finally intervene, because it's like, okay, now it's affecting your ability to earn a living.
Right.
But really, if you can hit it in the first 2 to 3, then you can actually heal it faster. But at any stage, you can heal it. And so one of the things I had to do is I studied a bunch of Eastern religions and philosophy and Buddhism and all that kind of stuff when I was in graduate school, just because breathwork and meditation and those kind of things have been a staple of mental health for so long. I wanted to figure out, well, where did this come from? And so that's what I went back to. I went back to therapy. I got on an antidepressant. I worked with a therapist, and I started doing basically a meditation routine that I still do to this day. I meditate for 3 minutes in the morning, and then I journal for 2 right after it. And then I meditate for 3 minutes in the afternoon, and then I journal for 2 in the afternoon. And then I do that the exact same process just before bed in order to keep me on track throughout the course of the day, to check in, to do that stuff. And when a lot of people hear 3 minutes, how can you only meditate for 3 minutes? What will 3 minutes do? I ask them this question. When's the last time you sat still and sat quiet for 3 minutes? How much stuff goes through your brain when you sit in silence for 1 minute, let alone 3?
Wow. That's amazing. You gave a lot of tips there for dealing with grief and burnout, which so many of us either are now experiencing or have experienced. Thank you for sharing your personal story as well. And I'm so sorry for your loss. Really appreciate you turning that into an opportunity to help others overcome.
And I'd like to, if I could say one more thing about grief,
of course.
The thing I'd like people to understand about grief most is that grief is a part of life. Grief is the river that we walk in every day. Sometimes it's ankle deep. Sometimes it feels like it's up over our head, but it's the river that we walk in every day. So never be ashamed to ask for help when you're grieving. Never feel like that there is a time frame for your grieving. It's been almost 20 years and I still get choked up thinking about what happened with my mom, because that grief is still with me. It is a wound and it is a part of me that will always be there. But the choice that you have in these moments is, what's the story I'm going to tell myself about this? Am I going to be the hero of the story or the victim? I choose to be the hero, not the victim, because I played the victim for way too long and it sucks.
Right. And when you're doing it, you don't realize it even. The people around you, do, but you don't realize that you've given yourself a starring role in that dramedy, if you will.
Yes.
Wow. Look at the smile and how confident you are today. That's why I wanted to start with these questions, because I always want to set the foundation of, this is not just an expert academically, but you've also been through the things that you're now helping others
more
with.
than I'd like. Than I'd like.
I hear you. And the grief, correct me if I'm wrong, but people often associate grief with death of a loved one, but grief can be the loss of your home or the loss of your job. Is that correct?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Grief is not just the death of a person. Grief is the death of an idea, the death of an identity that you have about yourself. Grief can be the loss of a job. that you thought gave you purpose. Grief can be the death of pets. It can be the death of friendships. It can be grief is all these things, and yet none of these things. Because what grief actually is it's the sadness of forced change.
Wow.
Because that's what grief is. It forces you to look at, analyze, and change. And sometimes you do it, and sometimes you don't. And when you don't, you get stuck in grief long term, and then you just spin your wheels and spin your wheels. But when you accept grief for what it is, and you're able to figure out your way of moving through it, because I love Kubler-Ross's steps for grief, and I think it's great. But what I want people to know about those things is that grief is a nonlinear process. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't go through the process like that.
Hello.
If you do, oh man, you are the luckiest person in the world.
Or
if
robot.
You do that. You need to go buy a Powerball ticket right now.
Right.
But because grief is usually, you start at step 1, you go to step 5, you bounce back to step 4, you go to step 3, you go back to step 5. You're in anger, you're in denial, you're in acceptance, you're back into anger, you're back into denial, you go back to bargaining, you go back to acceptance, and that's what it is. And I've been through that probably 1,000 times since my mom died, is that process of,
right.
And sometimes it hits you the most difficult ways. Like my mom loved Christmas, and because we just went through the Christmas season, Christmas is an amazing time because I love being with family and I remember it fondly. And also it hurts too, because it opens that wound just a little bit, because it was always Christmas music and Christmas decorations the day after Thanksgiving, and so it's those kind of things, right? That even almost 20 years later, those things still pop up and still get you. But again, it comes back to, how do I reframe it in that moment? I could be sad about it. I could feel horrible that she's not here, or I could go, she would want me to enjoy this holiday because it was her absolute favorite. Again, do you play the victim or do you play the hero?
Wow. That's really good. And it's great advice, not only for the people going through grief, but for the people around them. I've lost loved ones. I've been through divorce. I've had just some really difficult, tragic things happen. Yeah. And it is amazing how often people want to put you on a timeline. Oh, just get over it. Why are you still thinking about that, talking about that, crying about that? And like you just said, it varies per person. You can't, there's no clock, no button. You can just turn it off. But, for me, as long as I was gradually but surely moving forward, especially after I got my cancer diagnosis, I mean, you talk about that changed my whole world in a word. When he finished that sentence, everything before that was totally different than the remainder of my life. And I've tried to make that test into a testimony, but there's not a moment that I forget that happened. So, and
it's the thing, that cancer diagnosis for you was a grief moment.
Yes.
Because there was now before cancer and after cancer. Well, and during cancer too. So there was those 3 eras, and each one of those eras created this pocket of grief that you figured out how to work through. And it's one of the most difficult things to have, because it's literally, again, it's a lot like an autoimmune disease, right? It's your body literally attacking itself.
Yeah. And that's a hard blow to take. It's one thing when the whole world is coming against you, but when you're fighting yourself, that's a tough one. Thank you for explaining that better than I've ever been able to. So I've got another one that impacts a lot of people that I know you have some great strategies for, and that's being a people pleaser. A lot of people fall into this habit. Yeah. I want you to do 2 things. I like compound questions. First, if you would define the term people pleaser in the event someone is not familiar with it. I'm assuming burnout and the other things we've talked about they are familiar with, but people pleaser perhaps not. And then share how we can start to break that habit.
Sure. So people pleasing is, at least in my opinion, because I am a recovering people pleaser from way back in the day, and it is one of those things that people pleasing is when you sublimate, which means when you put yourself on the back burner every single time. So it's whenever someone comes up to you and says, hey, I need this thing. And your first inclination is always yes. You never put up the boundary and say, no, I can't do it today. I can do it later. It's always yes, yes, yes. And so you end up being completely drained all the time because you never have boundaries that are strong enough to say, that doesn't work for me. And that's one of the most difficult things for someone that is a people pleaser to create is good, strong, healthy boundaries because people pleasing usually comes from a source of where either you were bullied by somebody else and you became so hyper vigilant that you were trying to anticipate what they were going to do next. And so you tried to do everything you could to preemptively make them happy. That's what people pleasing is in a very simple thing. And bullying is not just punching and kicking. It's also words. It's also feeling like you're not worthy, feeling like you're an imposter. Those different things are all part of the people pleasing thing. And so when you are people pleasing and when you do get stuck in the people pleasing cycle, you find yourself being exhausted at the end of every day, wondering why you don't have any energy for yourself. And it's because you basically give it away to everybody else and to anybody else that needs it. And the most difficult thing about that is for someone that's a people pleaser, they basically, it's like they're just an open energy channel and their energy just flows out. And there are people out there that that feed off of other people's energy. And so they do that. They seek you out. They find you because they can sense it. And then they ask you to do things and all those things. And you say yes, 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 because your greatest fear is if I say no, then you won't like me. Because if you don't like me, then that will confirm everything bad that I think about myself.
Oh my.
So really, the only way to fix people pleasing is to fall back in love with yourself, is to create that strength within yourself that you are enough exactly as you are. Whether you do or do not do for somebody else does not define you. And that's the hardest lesson I had to learn because I was very good at not being a people pleaser as a therapist. But in my personal life, very bad at being a people pleaser, where I would do anything for anybody. Oh, you need some money? Yeah, I got some money. Here you go. Oh, you need this thing? Yeah, I can do that. Oh, you need me to do these things and help you move? Sure, I got a pickup truck. Oh, you need this kind of stuff? Yeah, I can do that. And then I'd get home and I'd just be exhausted because there was nothing left for me because I didn't give myself permission to have anything because I didn't feel like I was worthy of having that.
Wow. And I love that you said they can sense it too. Sense it. Other people can. It's almost like a weakness, like abusers even. They, they know, or bullies, they know who they can pull that on and they know who, when they're going to catch these hands. Like people like me, I'm small, but I'm not having it. It is just interesting that people have that very strange ability to detect a weakness in someone else, but we have to be on guard and put those boundaries up, as you said, or we exhaust, we deplete ourselves, and then we're not good for anything. And especially reaching our own, I feel like we all have a purpose here. And if you're spending all your time on other people's dreams, you're not pursuing your own purpose with passion. So,
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things I'd like to talk about boundaries really quick is I want to define boundaries for people, because a lot of people, the way they think of boundaries is I'm telling you what you can't do. That's how most people think of boundaries, but that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is I will not tolerate this for me. That's what a boundary is. That is a healthy boundary, because by you telling people what you won't tolerate and then letting them know, and if you violate the boundary, this is the consequence. It's not done out of spite. It's not done out of anger, out of maliciousness. It's just saying, I won't accept this anymore because I don't want this anymore. But if you do that, then the hardest thing is sometimes you got to leave people behind because you find out that they are those kind of people, even people that may be family members, that may be best friends from forever. And if that's one of the hardest things to do is recognizing that sometimes you can't take everybody with you when you're on a journey of healing because they are sometimes some of the sources of your pain.
Wow. Well, with all these conditions and the things I mentioned when we started out, depression, anxiety, and so forth, people often seek professional help from someone like you, for example. But you've said the mental health system in America is broken. Why do you say it's broken, and what can be done to create a better, more connected and accessible mental health system that benefits all?
The first thing for when it comes to mental health is it's a societal issue where mental health is seen as a personal weakness. And that's not the case. It's not a personal weakness. Because if you ask anybody that's dealing with any kind of mental health issue or trauma, they would say, cut off my arm if you could make me not feel this way. I would much rather live without an arm than feel this way. But the problem is that we don't look at mental health as something that is an actual injury to the body, to the soul, to the mind. They're actually just finding out, thanks to really the new functional magnetic imaging, that trauma is, they're trying to get it rebranded as, instead of PTSD to PTSI, instead of post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress injury. Because now with that kind of imaging, they actually did a study on a bunch of sexual abuse survivors and veterans that came back from the war, and they can actually see where the synapses in their brain were melted because of the trauma that continued to occur. Because trauma, you have to remember, your brain is just electricity and chemicals that are spitting across these two super teeny tiny wires. But the thing is, if you run a whole bunch of current through a wire that can't handle it, it destroys and melts the wire. And they're finding that happens in the human brain when trauma happens, that it creates an actual injury point that they can see based on blood flow and based on the way that the chemicals move in the brain. They can actually pinpoint, oh, this is where you're holding that trauma, literally physically in your brain and in your body.
So is that synapses or what is the... That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. The little synapses where there's each one a little the synaptic cleft right here. And that's where the neurotransmitters spit across there. That gets burned to where it becomes melted, and you can actually see it And it actually, it's not like it's a giant quarter-sized thing. It's like super, nano microscopic kind of thing.
Right.
But they also found that from doing that trauma is not stored in the brain like other memories. Trauma is stored so other memories are stored as memories where they happened in the past, and your brain knows that they happened in the past. Trauma is stored in the brain as if it's currently happening. So when a traumatic event or a re-triggering happens, that's why you feel like it's happening again right now, just as powerful as when the event happened, be it 20 years or 2 years. It still comes back the same way because of the way it's stored in the brain.
That's amazing. And I can give an example because I just went through it driving back and forth to Galveston. I had a very bad accident. My car hydroplaned on a road that was under construction, and it had those barriers up. It was 2 lanes and barriers up on both sides. And I bounced like a ping pong ball between those. And I was on the phone. I dropped the phone, and my friend said she could hear me screaming the whole time as it was happening, which I'm sure was traumatic for her. I had to be cut out of the car and rushed to the hospital. But the trauma or the experience is that whenever I'm driving, that's been years ago, and I'm between 2 barriers like that, I get so anxious about it. And it's not raining, the traffic's fine and everything, but it's like it just happened. I can hear it and everything. And that's just crazy to me. But now I understand it better because of what you just said, because I keep thinking, why am I thinking about this? That was so long ago. I should be over it. But I'm not anticipating it. It just comes.
And it's stored in your brain as if it's now. So that right there, box breathe.
Box breathe. Okay.
Box breathe in that moment, because that's something you can do while driving. And it will soothe because what's happening is your parasympathetic nervous system is turning to full-on fear mode, like it's happening again. So if you can box breathe during that moment, you'll stop it from getting into the next level of fear that of where it engages your brain to the point of where you're now reliving the memory. I actually have that too, because I rolled my pickup because of black ice. So every time I drive over a bridge, even in California, because this happened to me in Wyoming as I was driving back to California. So even in California where snow and ice don't exist, driving across a bridge makes me clench up completely all the way, even though I know there's no possible way that there's going to be ice on that bridge. But everything in me is like, are you sure?
Yeah, exactly.
You could be the one person that finds it for some reason.
Thanks for sharing that and for explaining it, because I have just tried everything, and so now I just tell people, look, if I get a little weird when we go through this construction, I just,
so the moment you start seeing like the orange cones, the moment you start seeing any kind of construction, just breathe in, hold for 4, breathe out, hold empty for 4, breathe in and hold for 4 as you're driving through it. And that will keep your body recognizing that you're not in danger. Because
we're okay.
What happens when you were going through that is you were breathing like you were being chased by a tiger, going to be ripped apart. So that's how your body was reacting. And that's probably once you really begin to recognize that, when you're in the midst of these moments of when trauma reappears, you'll start to recognize that feeling in your body and go, oh, I know what to do to stop this feeling so it doesn't get up here. Because the good thing is there's a delay between the 80% body fear and then the brain kicking in and adding the extra stuff to it, to where then you get stuck in paralysis, where you get stuck in that really fear-based thinking. It takes there's usually about a 2 to 5 second gap. So if you're just mindful of it and then you can recognize that, you can actually derail it before it even starts.
Excellent. Trust me, that will be happening. I've got another road trip coming up, and there's always construction in Texas, always, since I was born. Thank you so much. Let's talk about your transformational system that's allowed your clients to make significant positive changes in their personal lives and relationships. Tell us about that.
Sure. So through all the work that I've done, and myself and with all these different clients that I've had over the years, I decided to kind of distill all the stuff that I do, because what I found for myself and for my clients is one of the biggest barriers to change is that, well, I don't have time to do that. So I figured out that if you can give people small 15-minute chunks of things they can do on a daily basis, where they can work on these different skills over the course of a couple of months, doing it just 15 minutes a day, it allows them to make these changes gradually to where they actually begin to see the change and then continue to use the process. Because that's the biggest thing, is like, it's just like we're in New Year's time right now. Right. And so the New Year's resolution is the most failed goal ever invented. It is the most failed goal ever invented, because the goal is usually something so lofty that it can't be completed. And so it then creates this, you get fatigued when you're doing a goal, because it's hard to continue to strive every day towards these goals. It's like, so the best way I like to teach people about goals is climbing a mountain. Because climbing a mountain, if you're at the bottom of a mountain and you look at the peak of where you need to go, pretty much your brain is going to go, no, hell no. I am not going to do that. You want me to go there? We are staying down here. Let's take a nap. I'm done. I'm tired before I even start. So that's why breaking the goals down into the long-term goal, which is the mountaintop, the mid-range goal, which are the little base camps that you're creating along the way. And you can have 100 base camps to get to this goal. It doesn't have to be 2 or 3. You can have as many as you need. But then what's really important is the steps in between are the 15 minutes a day of focusing exclusively on working on that goal. And by doing that, the 15 minutes a day, and this is the most important lesson that I've learned in goal creation, is build in failure, build in cheat days. Because if you can build in days when you can say, today I just don't want to do it, as long as it's part of the goal, hey, you're still on track. Isn't that a great trick?
I love it. Yes.
Because when you don't do that, you then feel like a failure. And then when you begin to feel like a failure, the negative self-talk, little demons come out and start chatting in your ear like, see, I told you weren't going to do this. See, I told you couldn't make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But by building in those points of saying, today I don't want to do it, I'm taking one of my cheat days. So in my life, I have 3 cheat days that I've given myself a month. And the crazy thing is, I rarely use them because I don't need to. Because I know the stuff that I do is going to be good for me long term. But knowing they're there is this cushion of, what, if I don't want to do this today, I don't have to. Well, it's only 15 minutes. I can find 15 minutes. And again, how do I do my 15 minutes? 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunch, 5 minutes at dinner. If you can't find 3 5-minute periods during the day, then what are you doing?
What are you doing? That's exactly what I was thinking.
Really?
What are you
5
doing?
minutes?
Right.
And that's it. Literally set a timer. Set a timer for 3 minutes and just sit there and breathe. And then whatever comes up the most in the morning, take that and write about it. And then use that as the thing you want to work on that day. And then look at it again at lunchtime. And then look at it again at dinner time and see, how did you stay on track that day? Because that's the only reason I broke it up, was because it helps me stay on track. If you need to do 15 1-minute sessions a day, fine. Do 15-minute 1-minute sessions. If you need to do 7 2.3-minute sessions a day, fine. Do 7 2.3-minute sessions a day. Whatever you need to do, do it. There is no right way. The only way you fail is if you don't try. So just continue to try.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love it. And I'm guessing that I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, but it sounds like we might have gotten into your new book. And I'll say the full title this time, Beat Burnout in 15 Minutes a Day, How to Prioritize Yourself Without Losing What Matters Most.
Yes.
Is there more you'd like to tell us about the book? I love the title, Clint.
So I wrote that because it's a part. So I wrote it. It's a part of my life coaching course, and it's a part of, and it basically is my life coaching course. I put it in that book because I want it to be in a way that people can read it and understand it. Every chapter takes about 7 minutes to read, 7 to 15 minutes to read. I made it as simple as possible so people can just do that 15 minutes a day, and they're accomplishing something. And then each chapter has a couple of different worksheets to help bring the points home in the chapter to help you get deeper into that if that's what you want to do. Because that's part of the process, is the more that you are able to turn back and look at yourself and say, what was my part in this? And then decide if you want to continue to do that. And sometimes you may decide that, yes, I still want to do that. Okay, go ahead. Sometimes you may say, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, then don't. There is no wrong answer. But it's you building this thing for you so that you feel like you are making progress. That's the thing I want people to understand, is there is no one way. I am not an expert in being a human being. I am figuring it out just like everybody else. That is if there's one lesson I could teach everybody on the planet, is we are all making it up as we go along. Everything that Dr. Mo and I talked about right now, we made up as we were talking.
And it's subject to change as we know more. As we know more.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, is, so if everything is made up and we all make it up as we go along, then there is no wrong answer. There are better ways to do things, but it doesn't mean that you struggling through your way doesn't mean you won't get where you want to be. It just may take a little longer. That's why having a life coach, having a therapist, having good friends, having people that can give you an external perspective helps shape your path faster so you can get where you want to go faster. That's why never, ever, ever, ever feel ashamed to ask for help. Because I've been doing this for 23 years. I'm a therapist. I'm supposed to have all the answers, right? But that's the thing, is I don't. I go to therapy myself. My wife is a therapist. I ask my friends questions all the time, and they're not therapists, because sometimes I need a non-therapeutic opinion.
Right. Wisdom. Anyone can have wisdom. Yeah.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with just trying and failing, because remember, as long as failure is a part of the goal, you're still on your way to success.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like a wonderful read. I look forward to reading it. It is definitely something that I need, something that we've all struggled with. And I am just really, really excited about the tips and strategies you have shared so freely here today. I appreciate it, Clint. Before we go, how do listeners connect with you online or however you choose to be connected with and order your book?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on, you can find my book at www.smallchangesbigimpact.net. You can find it there. You can also find me at Facebook and Instagram at Small Changes Big Impact the number 4 and the letter U, because that's what I want. I want small changes and big impact for everybody. And so if you can find me there and you can reach out, and if you message me, I'll answer you, because I just want, because one thing I've learned is that about me is the reason why I do this is because I've suffered, and I don't like seeing other people suffering if they don't need to, because there's enough needless suffering in the world, and anything I can do to help move you through it and past it, that's what I'll do.
Absolutely. And folks, I really encourage you to download this episode of the podcast, because you have just heard all sorts of great tips and strategies to deal with some of the very difficult challenges we all have. And please order Clint's book, follow him on Facebook and Instagram. We'll have the links in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Clint. You have been so inspiring and so helpful. I really appreciate you and wish you continued success. And I hope your book becomes a bestseller.
I'm working on it. And thank you very much for for having me and for giving me the ability to talk to your audience, because the more we can share this with other people, the more that they'll see that there is no one right way and that we're all trying to figure it out.
We're all trying to figure it out. And with that, to our listeners, thank you for your time and energy. Continued success to you on your journey to figure it out. And in the meantime, please remember to like, subscribe, and share for more like this. And visit my website at drmoanderson.com to book me as a speaker and learn more about my books and services. Until next time, be safe and be well. Thank you. And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and renew. Thank you.